Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. We are indeed starting things off today again in the little bee farm. Oh man, not this again. No, not again. We are not having this happen again. Oh my god. Nope. Nope. I kept the totem on me for a reason. Freaking Enderman. So we are starting things off back here again today in the end, and the reason for that is because last episode we kind of started off in the end and we had a project that I wanted to kind of take on and we were going to kind of showcase, and then that didn't really end up happening because of, you know, the whole change in plans and, you know, the whole end trading thing, which if you haven't seen that episode, you really should. It's really awesome. You can see our little end trading setup where we use infinite trading to get all sorts of cool stuff, which you don't usually get. So go ahead and check that out. But we ended there. We kind of abandoned the B project, but that doesn't mean the B project was altogether given up. You see, we were working, or, you know, we were working on things in the background, kind of getting some things ready for the bee farm. And actually, I believe, considering from what I remember last time, I believe we kind of had pretty much most of these things done. The idea is that we're going to be working on the bee farm today. I've already done most of the stuff. At this point, you're watching it. Everything is kind of built. So we'll go ahead and deal with all the kind of built stuff anyway. And I usually start off the situations kind of with like an update, you know, I like to give you guys a little heads up on what's been happening on the server. And it's not been crazy busy recently, so there's not like a huge amount. So we'll keep that kind of stuff maybe towards the end. And maybe if there's, you know, some interest, you can stick around and see what we've kind of been up to. But mostly the situation here at the moment is that we are going to be checking out the bee farm. So let's go ahead and have a little look at the state of bees down here first of all. So if you come into this room, you can see we have some bees set up here. The reason for this was, I can't actually remember. I needed some honeycomb for the bee building. So I set some of these honeycombs, some of these beehives back here again. And I kind of closed it off just so there's this little section. And I was thinking what might be cool is if I just kept this little area over here and just use this as like a breeder, so I can get rid of everything else over here and maybe just use this as a breeder. Although it doesn't totally make sense because really just having this stuff in the end kind of really only works like efficiently with the fact that you're gonna kind of have this as like you know, runs 24 hours as they do in the nether and in the end. But considering this is going to be a breeder, which is going to be using involvement of a player, for example, probably not the best place to keep it. So I'll probably reconfigure this and maybe add this as like a freaking Enderman. And maybe add this as like an extension to the current bee farm that we got set up. So maybe I should use that instead, and then we can just kind of like make a separate module for it where I can do bee breeding if we really need to. So that's probably going to be a plan. I think I might actually do that later on in the video. Maybe that'll be like a little head off towards the end of it. But I think the first thing we're going to want to do is check what else we've been up to. So I actually moved the bees over. They were all in here, so they've all been shifted to where they're going to be needing to be at the end of this video. So we've got all of those. It's empty, so we won't be needing those. All of this is basically good to be blown up, but I think considering that I haven't actually set up the new bee breeder in the nether where the actual bee farm is, I think we'll just go ahead and leave this here for now. So before we head over to the actual bee breeder, to the honey bee farm, maybe we should have a look at what the design choices were when it came to like building the redstone. I'm going to get out of here because I've been attacked twice already and I don't feel very comfortable anymore. So we're going to go ahead and leave. So let's go have a look in creative. Let's go see what things kind of worked out as some of the redstone I used to make things the way that I wanted to. Now, if you don't remember, in the last episode, I mentioned that it would be we'd be using like a specific setup to make sure things were lag efficient and looked good and worked well. So let's go ahead and fly our way into creative. So as usual, here we are in the creative world, and we're going to take a little look at... Wait, hold on. Something about this doesn't seem good. Give me 1 second, I'll be right back. There we go. That seems a little bit more fitting, I think. Perfect. Okay, so now we can get on with the redstone part of things. So anyway, as I mentioned, we have a bunch of stuff here that I wanted to do when it came to optimizing what I wanted from the bee farm. So one of the things I wanted to do was it kind of encompass a few like key aspects to the whole bee farm thing. The main one being hopper locking. So realistically speaking, in each module of the bee farm, you're only really supposed to be using a couple hoppers here and there, which would be this one here, and then the one on top to enter items into. But I also wanted to make this relatively dustless. Now, unfortunately, I didn't completely get to kind of the objective of the dustless thing, mainly because I needed it for a comparator output. just to get a signal strength, which in this case was signal strength 5, which we have now through here. So we do have some dust available. Sorry, I shouldn't say available. I should say we do have some dust that is incorporated into the build. However, when you consider that it's all solid state, it never really changes unless well, you'll see in a minute, but it's really just an on-off state. You know, we're just trying to keep things as lag efficient as possible. So that brings me with the first design that I originally had with the build. So we were looking to keep things generally locked. So just like we have with these hoppers here, this hopper stays locked, and this hopper here and this hopper on top will also stay locked via this redstone torch and repeater. So the idea is that every time you have something that needs to be dispensed, this hopper is unlocked momentarily to allow the bottle of honey to go through. In this case, it's honeycomb. I'll get back to the issue with honeycomb in a little while. So the idea was essentially to make sure that we had the honey to just unlock the hopper literally just long enough to take out the bottle, and then it would be relocked again. And that way we would make sure that the hoppers stay relatively hopper locked throughout the entire time. The hoppers at the top, however, these are powered by the fact that the system would use bottles. Now, in this case, we've got shares, but it would work in the same way as using bottles. So we would have the case where, in fact, I might just be able to quickly do a little replacement over here, just to make things a little bit more clearer, I think. So if I go ahead and fill these in with bottles, there you go. That should make things a little bit clearer. I'm going to go ahead and empty all of these out as well, just so things can be make a bit more sense. So the idea between this system here as well is that everything would stay locked unless we were running low on bottles. Obviously, with the way that honey works, you would need to have the honey this dispenser be full, otherwise the honey bottles would be shot back into the dispenser, and in most cases, or in some cases, not be taken up by the item hopper underneath it. So this needs to basically be consistently full. We're going to hopefully see this be dispensed in a second, and I think, yep, we can see that there. You'll see that this will be emptied up, and you'll see that what will happen is that this will allow the system to recognize that we're not completely filled with honey bottles anymore, which would actually allow this hopper line here to release long enough so we can, you know, feed honey empty bottles back into the system again. So as you just saw there, you can see that the bottle got released. That's now gone into the middle barrel over here. That again was unlocking the hopper long enough to get the honey bottle out. And you can see here now that the two hoppers at the top here are unlocked. So again, the idea was that now that we have some space in the dispenser to take in a little bit more honey, we can go ahead and use this as an opportunity to refill this back up again. So if we did go ahead and, let's say for example, we had a refueling system somehow set up, if we go ahead and pop this into there, we would lock this whole thing back up again. And the way we would detect whether this needed filling and to send a signal back somewhere else was to cut off a power line from wherever it was. So you could see here, if you cut off this power line, the main power line over here, that would then make it so that there was nothing available. Actually, this is a little slice, so I'm going to go ahead and show you what I was actually kind of using there. So you would use a power block over here. So let's say, for example, this ran out. This piston would extend and remove the power, therefore letting the system know that it needs to be refueled. And then the same would go from here as well, and then so on, depending on however long you wanted it. So just having a look at it, ultimately this thing was relatively efficient when it came to lag, but it had a couple issues here that I didn't really like about it. So number one was the fact that I was using a piston, which I'm not sure if it's too laggy on the server, but definitely gets laggy a little bit on the client. But again, pistons are not the most ideal when you're looking in terms of lag efficiency. So we actually used a couple here in per one of these units. So you would use the one here, and then you would also use the one to destroy the signal to call in for the bottles. So I thought there was be a good opportunity here to try and get rid of these things to make them a little bit more efficient. But outside of that, this whole thing worked out really well. The only thing that didn't work out really well, as you can tell from the honeycomb floating over there, was, well, honeycomb. I didn't realize this at the time because I completely forgot that honeycomb gives out up to three pieces, or I think it is 3 pieces every time, of honeycomb. So the amount of time that this stays released in order to get honeycomb through is not long enough. And then what tends to happen, as you saw in the other one, which you can't see here, but you can see here, is the honeycomb just gets backed up in the hoppers. Eventually, what happens if you use the same system is that you will end up having a bunch of this backed up, and then it will just eventually back up to the point where it's no longer useful. My original solution to this was to use this system, which would depower that, and then obviously we'd have a delay, so then that would depower this, which would keep this depowered as well, and then it would just extend the whole system out a little bit longer just to make sure that you could get the honeycombs out of there. It worked, but again, it just added another piston to the whole scenario, and it just wasn't, you know, again, it was missing the point of lag efficiency. But anyway, at the time, I was kind of happy with it, so I carried on with making the system work. So we kind of had like an entire thing built here, which is what I was hoping the whole thing to look like. But with everything in mind, I thought, you know what, let's try and optimize this a little bit better to make it not look like this. The solution that I ended up really going for, the kind of idea that really worked for me, was this one right here. So this uses exactly the same mechanics, but uses no pistons at all. So we've got two sides here. We've got the honey and we've got the honeycomb on this side. I'm not sure if there's any bees in this one. So essentially this is exactly the same system that we showed earlier on, less the pistons. So we do the same thing, just unlock this hopper quick enough to grab the honey bottle out of there. And this one needed a slightly bigger pulse just to get the 3 honeycombs that you can out of it. And you can see that I kind of got rid of the problem long enough where we didn't have to worry about that anymore. So design-wise, still the same thing. The way the dispenser is now powered is by this redstone torch here. Obviously, once this loses power, that will try and dispense a bottle out. And then obviously, in this case, you'll get your honey bottle if there was honey to be dispensed in there. And obviously on this side, same thing, but with shares. So with a design kind of in mind and figuring out, okay, so we know what we want to do with it. We're going to go ahead and implement it in the same way that we did before. So we're going to have it tileable, and we're going to make some optimizations even to the piston layout that we're using to call in to refill the bottles. So now instead of using the system where the piston would lose power or extend to remove power, we're now using a comparator link here on subtract mode. Actually, little point out from Sensei, I think it was, I believe, who probably helped me with this one, because I knew there was a way that this should be to get a signal to come through, and yeah, so he kind of just pointed this out to me, which was a pretty good little signal just to help things out with. So as you probably just saw a second ago, all this does now is if this system starts to get low on bottles or shears or whatever it is, so we'll take one out, the minecart is then called over to say, hey, we're running out of bottles or running out of shears in this specific thing that's broken. Let's just go ahead and quietly move over to this unit here. This one actually incorporates bottles as well, so that's even better. So yeah, same situation. So for example, now what we'll do is we will take this one here, go ahead and empty that out. Don't know how a redstone bottle got in there, but anyway. So you see now the minecart is now called into commission. It's going to go ahead and fill this one up. And because all these hoppers here are locked, you're not having the issue where the bottles are being filled up in unnecessary units. That just kind of saves them bottles, saves them things kind of like overflowing. It was just a nice thing that I wanted to add just to make sure you didn't have any issues with kind of like just flooding the system with bottles. And yeah, I just thought it was cool. So now it's only being called whenever you run out of a bottle, and the system here is running just off a really basic design. Again, this is the comparator line that powers everything, and we use a same thing again, an AND gate here. So as long as this one and this one both have power, then the system will not run the minecart over. But as soon as one of these lifts, because this loses signal, so if I remove that, for example, you can see the piston retracted. That sends off the minecart to go and fill something up. This is just kind of like little extra features I added in just for the sake of the fact that I liked the feature like that. Realistically speaking, if you're going to have this running, you can just have the minecart doing loops and then just refilling every time it really needs to, or just having it like come back to one place, stop quick long enough just to fill up a few bottles and then just head off again. Didn't need to have a system where you call everything in. But when you're putting enough effort into stuff like this already, and you're putting all the redstone and repeaters and stuff like that, wasting a few more comparators here and there doesn't really make a big deal. And the collection system is running on a similar premise. So you can see here, these barrels are the output. So the barrels actually shared between 2 units on each side. Like you can see here, these 2 are sharing and these 2 are sharing. And then that carries on the same way. And then you have a comparator output just over here, which again is using a repeater line to activate a minecart hopper from right down here. So for example, if a game, same sort of premise, if you go ahead and chuck a bottle in there, that will set off the line, and you'll see that this powered rail that it's sitting on will get powered. Hopefully, we'll see that in a second. There we go. So that goes and sends off the minecart that will go pick up all the bottles, and then eventually we'll just come back here, empty the items out, and because it will have nothing else, this piston's been retracted and doesn't allow it to go forward anymore, unless of course more bottles end up in the system. And obviously just down here we have a shulker loader where all the items will go into. Obviously it's missing a shulker right now, and that will fill up all of the shulker boxes, break the boxes, and then they'll end up in this hopper here, which eventually will lead to some sort of main storage. And if we move over just to the left over here, we now have this unit where we use the honeycomb. Exactly the same situation with pretty much everything. Obviously in this case it's using the extended piston delay just to give us the opportunity to get all 3 honeycombs out of the system. I actually forgot to mention one last thing, isn't that important, but the same thing with the hopper locking situation also happens with the hopper input for the boxes. It's going to use, and ultimately the refueling of the boxes is going to use a similar system to how this system uses for bottles, where there'll be a central storage for all the shulker boxes of bottles, and then it will have a call-in system. So as soon as one of these runs out, that again will unlock the hopper, which didn't happen that time. I already had one in there, never mind. So we'll take that out and take that out, and that will allow that to go through, and then there'll be a separate line here that's going to end up calling in the chest minecart to come and fill this back up again. Same thing again, that will lock up, make sure we're not feeding in extra bottles to places that don't need them, or extra boxes in this case. So I think I've mentioned everything pretty much that I liked in terms of positivity for this design. Obviously, there is a couple of negatives to this. It isn't the most compact that it can be because it's not one wide tileable, for example. In order for me to have done that, I would have had to use redstone dust, which was the non-solid state version, which I was planning on not doing. So it's kind of a good trade-off. It's, you get one every 2 blocks, you'll get another one squeezed in. As you can see there, I kind of squish it in where it's like a 1, 2, 2, and then it's basically like a gap and then 2, a gap and then 2 until you get to the end. So a little sacrifice, not a big deal for me. I think it looks pretty good either way, and it fulfills all the needs that we're going to need from it. So the next thing that I wanted to figure out was more or less how many of the units we wanted. So one of these units here has about 52 beehives in it. And so I was thinking, how many of each do I really want to keep? So in this scenario, we're going to go ahead, and I decided that I was going to have just the 1 honeycomb because it produces 3 honey combs per unit. So I'm just going to have one of these. And because we're probably not going to be, that's not really like the focus of the honey farm. Obviously, the focus of the honey farm is the honey. So these units, we're going to end up having 4. Now, originally, the idea was just to literally have the redstone just like this, made it look as pretty as I could. And we were going to end there, but I had a little word with a couple of the members, and everyone kind of came back around. Well, a couple of people came around to do a little collaboration sort of with it, adding their own little spice to it. But I won't show the full breakdown of the design yet. We'll see that after we've built that in survival and you check the little time lapse out. In fact, the keen eye, you probably just saw a little glimpse of it before. But with all the explanation for the redstone at least out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into survival. Let's check out the time lapse, and then we're going to go in and see how the design for the bee farm worked out. is looking pretty good. I don't know about you, but I'm enjoying the view of this bee farm, honey, beehive. Okay, so a couple bits that probably are worth mentioning. Number one, you can't really see the entire thing because of the location it's kind of in. My plan was to have it inside of a kind of a lava lake, and this was kind of the best one I could find. You kind of missed the top of it as well, but you kind of figure it out. It looks like a cartoon beehive kind of thing, right? Like not your typical beehive, because beehives don't look as uniform, unfortunately, as this does. But yeah, otherwise it's looking pretty good. Let's take a little peek inside, though. I mean, you probably caught a little glimpse of it when you were looking at the time lapse. If we get a little bit closer, it's a bit of a weird optical illusion happening here. And there you got the black concrete. We got the old AmbitionCraft logo here that fits in nicely. And we got the inside of the beehive here. Now, this was a really interesting design project, to be honest with you. A little bit outside of my comfort zone. And that was actually it was a really good idea that it was outside of my comfort zone, because I didn't actually end up doing any of the design, if I'm completely honest with you. I did all the redstone under there, but the design of the bee farm again mostly was done by Aztec and 50. But if we have a little look around here, there's obviously some differences from just the standard bee farm design, which you see on the right here, and what actually ended up being built. So let me run through a couple of the details with you. I guess the best place to start off would probably be somewhere near the beginning of the farm itself. So let's have a little look around here first. So first thing to note is we have little inputs here. So we've got shulker boxes, inputs for bottles on this side. And then if we have a little peek over here, we've got the same for shares as well. So that's just a nice, easy input in case we do run out and you want to restock. You don't have to go down into the maintenance room. The maintenance room is available for other things, but we'll go through that in a sec. You got the flips, so you can choose whether you want to start up the honey farms or just the honeycomb farm. There's actually only one of those and 4 of the other. But then when you go down here, you have a little look in the back here. We've got some scaffolding that we can go down. And we can have a little look at what's happening down here. Now, this is like the maintenance room slash... I don't know what you would call it, really. Let's just call it maintenance room. If we come down here, we're going to have a little look and see what we've got. So there's a couple of things in here. Number one was a crafting system. Fairly simple crafting system, nothing crazy. Probably on the slower side. Only does double hopper speed per box. Which, yeah, not the best, but it was good enough to get things going anyway. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put myself in free cam here just so we can have a better look at what's going on. So you can see we've got 4 modules of the honey. So this is the module at the top here. Another one at the bottom, and then the same mirrored on this side here as well. And at the bottom here, you can see the honeycomb farm. So we fit 5 modules all together. Don't worry if things don't look like they're aligned properly. I promise you that they are. They're to the center of the farm, and some things don't fit as well, so we had to make some adjustments. But yeah, everything's kind of looking nice over here. Made a couple quality of life choices with distribution for stuff. So for example, distribution of bottles. So you can see here, this is the system that unloads all of the stuff here. So we made a kind of a cooling system for all the shulker boxes of bottles. Every time a bottle is needed in one of these systems here, so I think we take it directly from the input of this dispenser. If one of these is removed, the minecart chest is activated. It will head up here, fulfill this this module here if that's the only one that's needed, and then it will head back there. If anything else becomes available afterwards or is needed in the process of it, it will basically just keep doing rounds until they're all full. Luckily, obviously, a shulker box of bottles is a significant amount of time in between when it's actually needed, so that one doesn't run as often. And then we've done something similar for shares here, but because shares is only one unit, you didn't really need to do all that. So I've opted for a slightly different system, which is dropping down boxes through this cobweb, which will land on the string that gets pushed over and eventually ends up into the storage here, where you would have there you go, where you would have the shares all stocked up in here. I actually realized as I made this as well, the shulker unloader I made before doesn't work with shears because shears are non-stackable. So it works a little bit differently. So I had to rework the unloading system here. Nothing crazy. You just need to lock one of the hoppers whilst you load shears into here, but otherwise all good. if we have a look on this side, we've got the crafting system, which what I'm going to do is I'll post a little video up here of me doing some crafting, AFK crafting from earlier on. Pretty straightforward system. You kind of just throw the honey on the ice and then it kind of gets pushed over and then gets added into a loader. So these are some loaders. I forget who they're by. Quite popular loaders. Some of my best favorite loaders actually. They are filtered and stuff. I've had quite a few 6x loaders which work with one item type, and they're pretty terrible, to be honest with you. The one wide ones specifically are pretty bad because the issue with them is that they generally spit out items when they shouldn't, which is kind of annoying. Seems to be something that is quite widely accepted in the storage community though. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that this looks pretty good now. We've done a bunch of the crafting systems. Other than the crafter here, you have the towers which are transporting all of the stuff to storage. Now we had two sets of storage here, one for the honeycomb, which you can see in here. At the moment, we haven't got a huge amount of honeycomb. I think, in fact, actually, it's only up to here. So we've only got, what is that? That's 5, 6, 7, 8, about 8 double chests of honeycomb, which is cool because we don't really need the honeycomb block all that often. It's not very useful outside of decoration. I think what this will be useful for is in 1.17, if and when we do finally decide to upgrade, and we can use that to kind of, I don't know what they call it when you want to like lock the copper into place. During the stage of wherever it is in its stage of like oxidization. So that'll come in somewhat handy for that, I guess, but in the meantime, otherwise all good. But the storage for honey is this section here. Now, this is a fair amount of storage for honey. The problem with honey bottles is that even when you put them in choker boxes, they only stack to 16, which is kind of annoying. Kind of doesn't really make too much sense either. I don't know why it's like that, but you needed quite a bit more storage for it if you wanted to get a good amount of honey. But if I have a look around here, you can see that all of this honey, all of these double chests are empty. And actually, this farm has been running for a little while, you see, because this video is now being recorded, or this part of the video is now being recorded like 3 weeks later from the original time-lapse clip that you saw. And we've AFK'd this farm for about three weeks or so. On and off, because I kind of turned it off at some points. We ran out of bottles, so I turned it off for like 5 days. There was like some stuff that happened in between, so kind of intermittently it's been AFKing for like 3 weeks. It could have been consistent if I had all the glass bottles, but there's a whole other story about that. But yeah, the reason why that's now empty, even though we've done all the AFKing for the honeycomb, is because we've actually been doing the crafting for it, as you saw from the video that you saw earlier of me actually crafting from the honey bottles. This is the loader. And again, awesome loader. But down here we have our storage for honey, or for whatever it is that's getting crafted out of there. And you can see here we have a good amount of honey now, actually. So we've got 2 and almost 3 double chests of honey blocks. And honestly, I think this is going to be a good amount of honey blocks for a fair amount of time. Redstone is still for some reason are a bit more hesitant to use honey in their builds for some reason, because apparently it makes everything easy. But you know, the Redstone community is a little bit lame sometimes, but you know, they'll eventually come around to it, and maybe it'll be a little bit more heavily introduced in some other farms. But in the meantime, we've got a good amount of honey here, and this should actually last a fair amount of time on the server. I would imagine, like, even with wild eaters, and I've got some projects planned that I'm probably going to end up using honey blocks for anyway. This is going to be somewhat useful for the upcoming things to do. But I think other than that, I've pretty much covered everything that you probably want to know about this honey farm here. Everything looks pretty cool, and I'm really happy with the results of it. I think everyone's kind of happy with it. Honey's not always like #1 priority in any of these kind of projects, but you know, when you just feel like doing something, you get it done, and then hey, sometimes you end up with something really cool. As for the schematic, I might leave this in my world download section just for the actual bee farm units themselves, not the entire you know, building and stuff. I might leave the schematics or the world download for the beehives in my world download, or I might make a separate video on it. I'm not 100% sure. If that is something you want to see, maybe hit me up in the comment section down below and let me know. Otherwise, I think I will wrap the episode up here. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye. Hey, you made it to the end of the episode, and this is just a quick slice in the end that I wanted to run a couple things by really quickly. Number one was the beet farm kind of build will not be in world download section of my video, because ever since I made it, I made something a little bit more compact and probably a little bit nicer that you can have in your world. That'll be a little bit more accessible for like stacking and tiling and stuff. So I think we're going to leave that. When I make the video for that one, you guys will have a copy of that anyway. The second thing I wanted to mention is, you may have noticed that the audio is a little bit clippy every now and then. I'm kind of working on what I'm going to be doing with audio going forward. I'm trying out a couple things, turning down my microphone that I'm speaking into, and turning up levels during editing. So hopefully this actually sounds a little bit better than the previous ones did. So if you have been annoyed by the audio, I do apologize. And one last thing is, this last section is also a little bit of an Easter egg if you made it towards the end. And if you know what you're looking at, I'll see you on the next one.